Dangerous to podcast alone.
Welcome to this talk is a show.
Wow, that was some high quality Foley sound effects there.
Thanks.
On the fly from sound director Madelyn.
I do think I'm going to be working in a capacity where I'll be working with Foley artists in 2020. Isn't that exciting?
Yep. And show them that when you do that.
Yeah, I will. I'll be like, this is exactly what I want from you.
Because they'll be so impressed.
It's kind of high-level sound production. Please don't apply if you can't match this level.
But yes, this is our side quest. We're a little bit later than normal because we did our decade episode in the middle of things. But it's my time to pick a topic for our side quest rotation. And because we have to continue the tradition of Emma doesn't know how to pick topics that work for this format, we're going to talk about censorship in video games.
Emma texted me I texted Emma 2 days ago being like, what are we talking about? And she was like, I tried to think of a small topic, so let's do one that'll take 20 hours to discuss.
I didn't even try to put any thought into whittling it down into a focus in this topic. No, we're just talking about something that you could make a course on.
What's great about Emma's topics is that we can just return to them yearly. Every year at this time, we'll have a censorship in games episode where we will be able to talk about things that are completely different.
True enough. That's true. Once we get through a rotation, I will never have to be creative again.
Yeah, she's front-loading the work. So Emma, what made you inspired to pick this topic this week?
Well, there's several things, actually. First off, in a couple of Games of the Year lists, there was this is the bigger one, I think. But in a couple of Games of the Year lists, there was a game called Devotion, which is made by Taiwanese. They're Taiwanese, right? Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I played Detention. I know what country it is.
Devotion?
Detention is their first game that is about Taiwanese history. Devotion is their new game, which I'm talking about. But a lot of people put it on the end of the year lists because it was good. But nobody can play it now because of a particular joke that was sort of hidden about Chinese leader, what's his face?
Right?
G?
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't remember. I would know, but it's slipping my mind right now. But anyway, Chinese Steam users pretty much review bombed the game, and they ended up taking it off and have not put it back on yet. And I saw a lot of people complaining in the comments, does this really count if you can't play it anymore? Which, interestingly enough, I don't remember being the case when PT was put on a lot of year-end review things when that came out.
Right.
But you know what? Whatever. I guess that was out longer.
As I'm sure we'll discuss today, gamers are not known for consistency.
Yes. And the other thing is that Tokyo Mirage Sessions, which is a Fire Emblem Shin Megami Tensei crossover that used to exclusively be on the Wii U, the most illustrious of consoles, is being ported to the Switch in
next week.
5 days or so.
Yeah.
And the thing that they're bringing to the Switch, however, is the North American release, or the Western release. I don't know if it was exclusively to North America, in which there's a decent amount of changes to it, including... I actually didn't realize how extensive it was, but it includes some outfit changes, some sort of changes to the 3D models of the characters, The ages of the characters are different, and one of the dungeons is different in theme. But now that's being released globally, so it's also coming out in that form in Japan. They've chosen just to update this one for the Switch version. And of course that has a lot of people slightly upset for reasons.
Emma, what specific things are they most upset about? Please tell us.
The certain changes to 3D models of the characters.
Like what?
Well, the vagina bones. They're gone. Where did they go? They took them away.
Where indeed? A question I often ask myself.
Yes, if you've never seen that tweet, it's very funny. Because that's not a thing. It's just that there's less, emphasis on her stomach area, I guess.
She doesn't have a V.
Yeah.
Which I feel like is more something that is often, sexualized for men. But here we are. No vagina bones.
They're gone. What's the official name for the vagina bone? Femur.
Why would I be qualified to make a judgment on that?
I was just asking to make it up. There's no such thing as vagina bone, Madelyn.
That's the colloquial phrase. The medical terminology, it's 30 characters of Latin. We're not going to get into that, but don't worry. It's official and very anatomical.
Right. But anyway, those two things sort of happening recently was what inspired me to want to talk about this topic. But it's been something that I've been sort of passively interested in anyway. Just because, I get the idea of the slippery slope argument, right? If you censor certain things, then you have less ground to stand on when they come to censor other things that perhaps aren't as immediately oh, no, I get that.
Okay, Neil Gaiman, fine.
I don't understand that reference.
He has, a semi-famous internet article talking about lolicon. And
I see.
How you have to stand up for things that you don't believe in to protect your freedom of speech.
I mean, a lot of... some people always bring up, Lolita, and it's well, you wouldn't go into Lolita, the book, and change her age to 18.
Right.
Right, because that...
Right, that's not the story. That's
not the story, and it changes the book completely, pretty much. So whenever the gamers come out and they're oh man, I can't dress my 13-year-old characters in bikinis, God, what will I do? How will I live? I get it. It's you start with that and then you go farther, but at the same time it's really? I'd prefer that wasn't in there to start with.
So let's get sort of one thing kind of terminologically straight. Even referring to the kind of stuff that we're talking about as censorship or an issue of freedom of speech is even not really correct.
Yeah.
Really what we're talking about here is capitalism.
Yes.
And these game companies, we can talk a little bit about ratings boards and how laws around that does force companies to make changes to things. But a lot of the stuff that people get mad about is just companies saying, yeah, these young-looking girls being 15 and showing their vagina bones is probably not going to fly in the West. And making those changes, voluntarily for their bottom line.
Yeah. It's interesting, though, in that it's weird how many games that come to the West that change the ages of the characters.
Right, and nothing
I
about
guess.
the models and nothing about, yeah.
Yeah, like, or even just, like, they'll change the outfits and but they'll also change the ages, right? Like,
Yeah.
I was with, like, Tokyo Mirage Sessions, and I was looking at Bravely Default.
Yeah, I was too. I have comparison images to Bravely Default in my notes this time.
But more than just her outfit, they also change her age from 15 to 18, which, if you're changing the outfit, I don't fully understand the point of that. I mean, I haven't played either of these games, so I can't say, like, how the story goes, but it feels significant that you're changing from 15 to 18 and how I'm supposed to read that character, just from, like, a story perspective.
Oh, for sure. I mean, what is also, I don't know, semi-interesting to me about Bravely Default is, like, it's on the 3DS. Like, I'm looking at this character model. I'm sorry, it's not very titillating, even in the original form. Like, what they change is they give her, like, booty shorts as opposed to whatever. I mean, I can't see the back, but, like, a thong or something in her, like, bikini outfit. Mm-hmm. And instead of having, like, a weird, freaky wrap-around belty deal, they, like, cover it up a little in her other, like, more leotardy outfit.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, this is on the 3DS. How big is the 3DS? I'm sorry. Like, it feels like you almost wouldn't be able to see this change.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. But I was thinking about it in terms of, like, looking at the actual changes and, like, because coming to the conclusion that, like, personally, I have absolutely no problem with outfit changes. And, like, maybe that makes me a hypocritical person. But, like, whatever. Do what you want. But I do find, like, age changes and story changes a little interesting. Right?
Oh, definitely.
Because, A, it changes the story and how you're supposed to read those characters. And 2, I find just, like, changing the character's age to 18 is like the company saying, well, okay, now it's legal, so it's not creepy.
Well, there are plenty of examples. Like, I was reading about examples of games where they just, like, they literally have, like, a text on screen that's like, this character is 18.
Yeah.
Just to, like, cover themselves.
Yeah.
Which, like, yeah, it makes me feel, it's really hard to separate taste from like, the principle of the thing here.
Yeah.
I mean, which is why I just think, like, rhetoric was, like, a bad invention. Like, we should never have invented rhetoric way back in Greece. Just because I don't like having to read all these arguments about it being, like, freedom of speech, censorship, the principle of the thing, when it's really about, like, I can't see my anime boobs as well.
Yeah. And I do think we should go back to what you said about, like, it's not really censorship.
Yeah.
Right? It's a company telling another company that this is what they want in order to release it on their platform in certain markets.
Yeah.
And that's not stifling them. Like, the game is out there. They were allowed to put it out. It's just that this one company, in order to partner with you to bring that game elsewhere, is like, here's what we need. And you can either say yes or no to that. But that's not censorship.
Yeah.
Particularly, like, and I think that's a good transition point, because I do find some of Sony's practices a little bit confusing.
Well, they've changed their policies semi-recently, it seems, in a way that's not very clear.
Well, that seems like the way it was also, too. But
Sure.
it's like, they will bring... they just seem to have stricter policies that aren't particularly clear than Nintendo or Microsoft. Which, you know, somewhat strict policies isn't necessarily a bad thing. God knows I wish Steam had any form of moderation. But, like, there's their version of Devil May Cry 5 has a scene that's edited that isn't edited on either platform and stuff like that. But what I do find baffling about it is that, like, they'll take, like, adult games that, like, there's no other purpose of these games other than to be porn, basically.
Yeah.
Or something resembling that. And they'll put out, like, censored versions of them. It's like,
why did you pick this up in the first place? Yeah.
Why? What's the point of censoring something that's, like, specifically meant just for people who want to look at, you know, video game porn?
Emma's really gesturing wildly here.
Come. What?
Emma's gesturing wildly.
I was really grasping for, like, another word, but it did not come to me. So that's the part of it, like, I understand, like, why you might put limits on games that are, you know, it is perhaps for a greater market, right? Like, you want to appeal to more people, perhaps even, like, a teenage demographic, even if a game is rated M. And so you might put stricter limits on what you can show. But, like, censoring things that are just clearly only meant for adults that know what they're getting into just seems wackadoo.
Well, part of the problem is, of course, you know, having an M rating on a game is supposed to prevent underage people from purchasing it, but in fact does not.
Isn't there a higher rating than M, though?
So there is a higher rating than M. It's called Adult Only, AO. But here's the thing. Nintendo, Microsoft, and Sony won't carry AO games. And AO games really can't be sold at storefronts, either. So you can make an AO game, it just can't be distributed on any of the platforms that anyone plays games on. Sorry, I think probably Steam would be fine. But it can't be distributed on consoles.
You can put whatever you want on Steam.
Sort of. Steam, too, does not have a clear... Like, they sometimes are like, whatever, and sometimes they're really not whatever, in a way that nobody seems to understand.
Yes.
Yeah, I did think it was interesting. I went into this research for this show expecting that I was going to read a lot about Nintendo censoring things. And it was fascinating to me that these days it's really Sony that is, especially for sexual content. I mean, nobody in the West is really doing too much to censor violence. There are a few high-profile cases from last decade. I mean, more than that. It's 2020 now, but you know what I mean. From like the aughts of highly violent games getting slapped on the wrist until they censored things down a bit. But it was fascinating to me that Nintendo is basically like, hey, if you can get it rated, then we'll sell it.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like Nintendo has very slowly tried to... Well, it's tried to hang on to its, like, family console thing while also slowly distancing itself from it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, the Switch has a ton more rated M games than I remember the Wii having.
Well, the Switch just has a ton more games. I just saw a tweet that the Switch probably by the end of this year will have, like, half as many games as have been released on every previous Nintendo console combined. So I think it's partially just a matter of there's so many more games that it's more noticeable that there are M-rated games. But also the fact that it's way easier to sell things on the eShop now, I imagine, than it's ever been. And so Nintendo can keep their whatever, like company content stuff really family friendly, and the most of the stuff that they're selling in stores and in physical copies really family friendly, and then can have all this stuff on the eShop that theoretically is harder to find unless you're looking for it.
Yeah.
Oh, but anyway, I got distracted. I read an article, and this was pretty dated, but at some point, like secret shoppers, basically, were able to buy M-rated games like 25% of the time or something, even if they were underage. So it doesn't really work. I'm sure that's even worse now when it's just like how do you prove it to the eShop? I don't even know. Presumably just say, here's my birthday.
Yeah. I mean, ideally, right, the parent, there's parental controls on all the consoles.
Right.
And ideally, the parent is using those to some extent, you know?
My point being, though, that in some ways, I understand why Sony would want to be really cautious with this kind of thing, because even these games that are obviously geared towards of-age adults, that was redundant, but here we go, must be pretty easy to purchase for people who are not of age.
I know, but, like, for something like Neko Para or Senran Kagura, like, is adding more steam really making it, like, less adult?
It's all about when it goes, like, I was seeing something that was like, they're worried in the wake of Me Too, and because Twitch is everywhere now, that, about, like, the content that is associated with the PlayStation.
Yeah.
So.
It's just like, why do they just cut them out entirely is some of what I think of.
Because nipples are the devil.
But that's what I mean. Why don't they just, like, not release those kinds of games on their platform?
Because
I guess because they don't want
to
totally drive people away or something. But yeah, I don't know. It's a confusing sort of policy.
Honestly, censoring your game is an excellent marketing strategy.
Because people will talk about it?
Like, would I have heard of... I mean, maybe I would have, because I enjoy Fire Emblem and I enjoy Persona. But would I have heard very much about Tokyo Mirage Sessions had they not removed the vagina bones? I'm just going to keep saying it, apparently. Like, almost certainly I would not have.
I mean, you never know. Like, I had heard of it just because it was like, oh man, the one game on Wii U I want to play.
I just mean, how many of these censored games that we're looking at people would not have been able to find or hear about, especially in this kind of adult game market, right? Presumably those are games that, like, they're not getting, like, mainstream press attention, really, or, like, getting reviewed in the same way, or being, like, advertised at you necessarily. And a great way to get a bunch of free advertising is to throw some steam over your potentially underage characters' private parts. And suddenly everybody and their mother is writing about you and tweeting about you and interested in the game.
Yeah.
And for all the people that say, oh, I won't buy it because it's censored, there are probably another 5 people who buy it because they're curious.
Yeah. I mean, I read an interview with the director of Xenoblade Chronicles X, which has some censored outfits, and he was just like, yeah, whatever. He was like, if things have to change in order to make it sell over there, then things have to change to make it sell over there, was basically, like, his take on it. He said something about, like, well, now that it's done, I don't really care what people do with it. Which was an interesting sort of take. But apparently Nintendo's localization team, like, pretty often, like, goes over to talk to developers that they work with and actually, like, talk through the changes that they want to make and get their input on those changes, right? Mm-hmm. So he at least made it sound like a very sort of collaborative process for something that's like so sort of accessory, I guess, to the game's release.
Yeah.
So it becomes like it. I mean, I suppose there's such a thing as self-censorship, although that's not like. That's hard to, like, actually define, right? Like, what is self-censorship and what's just, like, a guy making changes,
right?
Because they want to make changes. But, like, the fact that it's so collaborative makes it harder to take, like, cries seriously because it's entirely done in a lot of cases with the blessing of the original creators. And in Tokyo Mirage Sessions, they were like, yeah, let's just use this one for our global release, right?
Yeah.
So clearly they're not very upset about it over there, so it doesn't make sense. I mean, you know, I can understand why, but it doesn't really make sense to get super upset about it. And of course, you really only tend to hear about this, and perhaps it's because it's skewed this way too, like you said. Like, there is definitely a double standard about how we treat sex and violence, right? Like, oh no, boobs are the devil, like you said, but we can rip dude's spine out in glorious HD and that's fine. So perhaps you just hear about it more because this is the majority of cases that it happens to, at least over here in North America. We could talk about Australia at some point.
I have a bunch of other countries that I want to talk about a little bit, both because they're interesting and weird ones, and because they're just straight interesting ones.
Yeah. But really over here, you really just tend to hear people getting upset about it when it's like, I can't stare at my sexy girls because they're slightly less sexy. You know, like they're wearing pants, and pants aren't sexy.
I did see some people on Twitter being like, I actually like the short shorts better than Bravely Default. And I was like, good for you, buddy. Like, fighting the good fight.
I saw some comparisons of Tokyo Mirage Sessions outfits, and one of them I did like better in the Western release, and one of them looked a little silly based on and the original outfit looked better, I think. But it's just a matter of taste at that point.
I do want to point out that outside of the capital G gaming community, there's a very different conversation around censorship in video games in the West that does have more to deal with violence. That, unfortunately, often more comes from the, like, political perspective or
right.
the, like, violent video games causing violence world.
Right.
Even that has, I feel like, toned down from the fever pitch of, like, Grand Theft Auto, Mortal Kombat, Manhunt, like, real
well,
heyday.
I mean, the original idea, and the fact that it did get, like, an official ratings board sort of established, I think, like, having a ratings board is a good thing, right? It's a necessary part of distributing things so that you know what it's for. But yeah, that's a whole other topic, and it's mostly posturing anyway, so...
I did just want to point it out. That being said, apparently, you know, from what I was reading and some analysis and videos and stuff, it does seem like if you're moving from, like, a game is being moved from, like, west to the, like, Japan or the east, that it's more likely to see the violence being toned down.
Interesting.
As opposed to, like, over here, we see the sexual content being toned down.
Yeah.
Like, in Japan, and I couldn't, like, totally verify this, but there were a lot of people saying that they especially don't like games that show dismemberment because it's a common Yakuza, like, tactic, and they really discourage that being shown. Mm-hmm. So that games that have, like, kind of dismemberment scenes, they're, like, darkened and the textures are changed or the angles are changed so you can't see it as well.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's what I think makes this conversation so tricky, is because over here it feels like it's always, and that all anyone ever cares to talk about, like you said, is like, where's my bikini? Why can't I have my bikini? Yeah. But the fact is that every country has some wonky stuff that they will and won't allow.
Yeah.
And that I can imagine it's very, very difficult as a localization person to walk that line of, you know, what content can we change just for this region and what content should we change for everyone just to make it easier or whatever.
Yeah. Or if it's Australia, you just very rarely bring games into your country.
So they have like right now it's open for comments, their policy.
Uh-huh.
They're like, right now they're reviewing the standards, they're taking public consultation until next month. So maybe Australia will start to get a little more permissive in the future. But yeah, if you're taking your game to Australia, it better be pretty wholesome.
Yeah. I don't know the specifics of it. I always feel like I see, like, every once in a while, it's like, Australia has banned this game. Australia has banned this game.
So, like here, I mean, you know, in the US, you can sell a game that isn't rated, but it just no one will carry it, right? But in Australia, if it hasn't been rated, or if it's gotten like an unrated rating, you're not allowed to sell it. They're also really strict about drug use.
Yeah.
So DayZ was banned there, literally for something that wasn't in the game yet. In the code, they had an item that they maybe were going to roll out, not even necessarily in the Australian edition, but somewhere, that was like cannabis that would give your character some kind of beneficial effect. And because they found that not even in the game that anyone could play yet, in just the code of the game, it got banned. It's just so wild.
That is wild.
But you don't see too many people over here getting quite as up in arms about that.
Yeah.
In the name of free speech.
One of the other funny ones is, like, the release of the Wolfenstein games in Germany.
Right. So that was something I wanted to talk about.
Yeah. Just because all sort of Nazi imagery and iconography are banned over there. So you can't have swastikas, you can't have the Nazi salute, and Hitler is not explicitly banned, but strongly discouraged.
I did see someone who, at least on the internet, was claiming to be from Germany, that some of the censorship is not actually government. I need to stop using the word. Some of the changes are not necessarily government imposed. Like, yeah, you're not allowed to have the swastika, but that oftentimes game developers like go further than they're really legally required to go, in the interest of sensitivity. That being said, that's also changed in Germany.
Yeah, I saw that.
So Youngblood was the first, I think, game, but definitely the first Wolfenstein game to be released with its full Nazi imagery.
Yeah. To be clear, in case you don't know the Wolfenstein games, we've talked them a lot, but the Nazis are bad in that. They just are the enemies.
God, I can't believe that that's something that we have to say. Like, Jesus. If there's anything we can
anyone
assume.
Listening probably knows that, but, like, we were just talking about, like, the Nazi imagery with its full Nazi imagery. It's, like, it's bad. It's presented badly.
I know.
So you know.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's the reasoning behind that change is kind of, like, weirdly heartening. That basically the German kind of whatever organization oversees this has started to view video games more in the art sphere than in the whatever they were considered before sphere. Mm-hmm. And so because of that, you're allowed to use this kind of imagery sort of in the name of art. Isn't that sort of like heartening?
A little bit, yeah.
In a little weird way.
I mean, I think it would be a mistake to just, like, blanket ban a symbol over there because you don't want to deal with your nation's history, right? Like, obviously it shouldn't be displayed anywhere, like certain countries. But you can't just, like, be like, take an eraser to it either. So, you know, it's good that they let art use it for the sake of art.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Speaking of things that got banned for symbols, did you know that Saudi Arabia has banned Pokemon, like, forever? Partially because it features 6-pointed stars. Also gambling.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think the 6-pointed stars are on the cards, like the playing card game.
Uh-huh.
But yeah.
Oh, something I forgot to look up, but, like, they released Kingdom Hearts 3 in China, right? And this is a good transition to
I wasn't
Devotion.
sure if it made it into the actual game that way or not. Is Winnie the Pooh there?
Yeah, I forgot to look it up. That was something I was curious about. Like, I know it was released there, but what did they do about Winnie the Pooh?
So if you aren't looped into this, it is President Xi Jinping.
Right, that's his name.
There's, like, a sort of Chinese kind of internet meme, basically, where they think that he looks like Winnie the Pooh. There's a really great one of him and, like, Barack Obama walking together that's worth looking up.
And he hates it.
He really does not like this comparison to Winnie the Pooh. I don't get it. I mean, I'm not going to try to get in the mind of anyone who's a head of state, because that's just a totally different person than me. But
I mean, I wonder if there's some sort of, like, offensive pun that we're missing because we don't know Chinese, but, like, it really just seems like people think he looks like Winnie the Pooh, and you really cannot stand to be compared Maybe it just feels like it diminishes him in
Right,
some
so
way.
that was how I was going to say, is like, okay, if you're really trying to project, like, strength, being compared to Winnie the Pooh is maybe not super flattering. But everybody loves Winnie the Pooh.
Yeah, honestly, to be a smart dictator, you would just kind of, like, lean into it, right?
Yeah, you would meme yourself.
Yeah.
You would show up at a press conference, crop top, no pants.
Yeah. No, not quite like that.
Emma. Why not, Emma? Censorship.
You're right. Give me my Winnie the Pooh sub outfit. But that's a decent transition into talking about Devotion, which I think was up on Steam for all of 4 days. Pretty sure. And players discovered this artwork in the game that appeared to be referencing this Winnie the Pooh meme. And obviously this is a Taiwanese game development company, so that comes with some charged politicalness towards Xi Jinping.
They've claimed it was a mistake that it made it into the release version of the game. It's like a background text. It's right, like it's like a poster.
It's like a very small, tiny thing. It's not at all shoved in your face. It's just there. In sort of a mirror of what, in sort of a worse version of what happens on Rotten Tomatoes over here lately, the game was like totally review bombed by Chinese users, and Steam doesn't really, like we've talked about, have any sort of way of dealing with that or any sort of moderation of comments or anything. So there was pretty no way to combat that, and they ended up taking the game off of Steam, which is the only place they were distributing it. And since then they have yet to put it back up, and probably will not put it back up, mostly because they probably just don't want to deal with that or even have the resources to deal with something like that. And yet, I know this is a very small game, and yet you hear nothing about this from the usual censorship type of people. And this isn't quite a straight case of censorship either, but I feel like it's certainly closer than what people usually call censorship.
Nobody forced them to take it down.
Yeah.
In a governmental way.
Yeah.
But certainly the pressure.
Yeah.
And the, no doubt, physical fear for reprisal.
Yeah.
Played a role. But yeah, to call it censorship is really still not quite right.
Yeah. It always, when something like that happens and like there's people who claim to be so passionate about censorship in gaming, like, don't pay attention to it. Like, it makes you, when they talk later again about something, it makes you go, do you really care though? At the end of the day, it becomes like a safe buzzword in the same sort of way that, and I'm not saying that everybody who complains about this is
there are plenty of people who hold consistent beliefs and get equally angry, but there seemingly are many people who are more focused on certain types of quote-unquote censorship.
It's just, in some ways, censorship in games is like a hide word in the same way that ethics in games journalism is a hide word. A straw man?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm smart. In that they're presenting something that, on the surface seems like something that everybody should be interested in, right? Like, we want journalism to be ethical, censorship is bad, but at the end of the day, that's not actually what they're primarily concerned with, or even what they're talking about.
This is why I said that the invention of rhetoric was a mistake. Steam in China is kind of an interesting case in itself. in that it's one of the like few media things that you're able to access in like its full form. Epic Games too. That's probably going away, at least for Steam, because they're kind of actively developing a Steam China that will have a much more limited library.
Yeah.
But it is interesting that right now Steam is one of the few kind of more or less uncensored forms of media in China.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Right?
Especially
Nobody really understands why it is.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the selection, like, you have to release a game by region still on Steam, right?
I believe so.
So it's not like every single game that's on Steam also makes its way to China.
Right.
Or at least I assume it doesn't.
It doesn't. But it's still, it's a much broader selection than you would probably expect.
Yeah. Although, then again, like, I don't know how strict that is on Steam's side, because really over here it really does not ever seem like Steam does anything besides, like, randomly calling out one game every once in a while.
Well, there's a lot of other kind of interesting Chinese, like, kind of genuine censorship stuff. I mean, kind of genuine. Actually genuine censorship stuff. Like, for example, I didn't know this. I didn't know that China had banned consoles for, like, 15 years. Until 2014.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Nintendo Switch just came to China, but right now it has one game. And that is New Super Mario Bros. Deluxe.
The only game you need.
There, it sounds like in the near future, there are a few other of the, like, really big original Switch, like Breath of the Wild, is coming over. But it's really hard to get games approved in China. They put a freeze on even submitting games for almost a year pretty recently because of the incredible backlog that they had and the amount of new approvals per year. And I think this is an increase. Right now is limited to just 5,000, which sounds like a lot, but isn't.
Yeah.
Also over there, PUBG, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, is known as Game for Peace. In this version, when you shoot people, they don't die, no one gets hurt, they just sit down and wave.
Really?
I hope I'm not getting trolled by this. I saw
it's
it
like
in
a
video.
paintball game, basically.
Let me look it up. I'm worried
Splatoon?
that I've just repeated something that isn't real.
I mean, I believe it.
It's Tencent's version of PUBG.
Right. It's like Splatoon, but gritty.
Kinda, yeah.
How interesting.
But yeah, you don't see the same people on Twitter getting mad about Game for Peace.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it doesn't, it doesn't affect them.
Right.
Right? Like, I at least see that sort of thing, in that maybe you truly believe in it, but also you don't really care unless it affects you.
Yeah.
Right? You believe and you don't want yourself to be consuming censored media. I'm sure that's the case for a lot of people. I'm sure that's the case for me on a lot of issues.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. But yeah, it frustrates me when, like, there's reporting of this and people are like, ugh,
Yeah.
Just because why?
Can I take a peek at something that feels a little off topic to what we've been talking about, but I think is really the genuine example of censorship in games?
Yeah, go ahead.
It's not in game development, folks. It's in that Blizzard scandal we've all forgotten about.
Mm-hmm.
The whole Hong Kong thing we were all really mad about 2 months ago, and I remember nothing about it now.
A guy, he was playing Hearthstone.
Yeah.
Like the Hearthstone tournament. He put on one of the face masks, I think, that they use over there as a symbol of their protesting, and said, "Free Hong Kong." while the commentators ducked under the desk and really quickly cut off the video feed. And in response, the player had all his winnings taken away, I think, and was banned for like 2 years or something.
Yeah.
And the hosts were also banned. Despite pretty much doing the only thing they could have done to appease the Blizzard overlords in that situation.
Yeah.
And there was some backlash about that, and they, I think, gave him like part of his winnings back and shortened the ban.
Right, but didn't overturn it. Didn't, yeah.
But yeah, just in terms of, like, there's some very vague wording in their contract that basically gives them free rein to, like, say, no, this isn't the Blizzard way.
Yeah.
And do what they want in a lot of ways. So technically it was legal, but it also said that what Blizzard stood for and what Blizzard thought was Blizzardy was to not support the Hong Kong.
Yeah.
This is Activision Blizzard also, I feel like.
Fair. Yeah.
Yeah. They were bought a while ago. And I believe there is some amount of Chinese stake in the company, which might...
well, it's always complicated, because, like, there's Chinese stake in the company, but there's also, and forgive me, listeners, because I read about this stuff, again, in October, when we all cared about this, and have not kept that same passion here in 2020, but, like, there's, like, companies have to have, like, shell companies to operate in China, basically. Like, you're not allowed to operate in China if you are, like, majority owned by foreign stakeholders. Mm-hmm. So there was something with that, too, and, like, the way that they like, operate in China is also controlled by this like, same company or something that made it very important for them to protect their Chinese stakeholders.
Yeah.
I'll take it back. I mean, this still isn't really censorship in games, because it is still the company doing it voluntarily. But certainly it feels like if they didn't do it, there would be the immediate, like, smackdown by the government. Whereas here, if you released a game with, like, if you somehow got somebody to release a game that was, like, more sexually explicit than is normal, like, the U.S. government would have to, like, would have to care enough to, like, pass a law and then come after you. Yeah. So it's much, much closer to the kind of real government censorship than the stuff that usually that word gets bandied about for. But that said, still a case of just Activision Blizzard saying we care more about the money here than freedom of speech.
Yeah. At the end, at the end of the day, all these cases of censorship are really just companies deciding what they want their image to be, right? Like, Sony really wants to,
not be sexy on Twitch. Yeah.
Not be sexy, not be horny on main, or whatever. Nintendo has sort of, loosened up. I don't really know what Microsoft policies are. And Steam just wants you to be able to play whatever rape and murder simulator you want.
Sort of. So they've now started cracking down on anything where the character looks too young. Some of that stuff is getting taken down.
Again, though.
I know.
It's like, why is that your only line?
I know.
Why can people release, like, these buggy messes and these things that, like, are just... There was just a rape and murder simulator on there.
Right.
Somebody released a game on there. Steam didn't have to put that up. They could have said, no, we don't want our company to be associated with this.
Yep.
And
it's inconsistent, even if we're just looking at the children and sexual content category. Like, I was reading some stuff about a game where he's like, like, there's a child that, like, witnesses, like...
Yeah, I read about that a while ago, too.
Yeah, and it's like,
there's some visual novel.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, the child is not in the sexual act, it's just witnessing one.
Right.
And even
you
as
don't
reading
even
about
really
it's like
see it.
not even really seeing it, yeah. It's like that counts as the child in the sexual situation. So that also, like, it just feels like Steam is, like, searching for words.
It's like they have a couple of interns who are, like,
have given, like,
perusing.
strict guidelines, like, just follow this one rule.
Yeah.
Anything with this, no need for context or anything, just in the bin, please.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's more about moderation in games, and people get upset when there's more moderation than when there's less.
But they also get upset when there's not clear or not enough moderation. You can't win.
Yeah.
You just have to decide the kind of person that you are.
Yeah, I guess so.
In many ways, Steam's, like, more or less anything goes policy is, like, more consistent than any of the other ones. But also it's terrible.
Yeah.
So.
I do feel like, at least because video games clearly aren't released in China very often, they avoid the, like, excuse that a lot of other media put out for, like, why they don't do things, for being like, oh, well, it wouldn't sell in China.
Did you see that big Twitter thread about that?
Which one? Was it about Star Wars? Because probably.
I can't remember if it was about Star Wars. It might have been. Just about how movie makers often censor, homosexual content because, you know, with the shell excuse of, oh, it won't play well in China. When, like, I think it's China, like, they were talking about China has been adapting these, like, homoerotic
The Untamed
books forever and just, like, winking at it, and that's fine.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, like, there's The Untamed is a very successful Chinese franchise. There's a animated series based on it too, and it's like it basically keeps everything from this pretty homoerotic book, except that, like, there's no explicit stuff.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, or it seems like they've somehow, like, you don't even really hear, like, filmmakers saying it, but they've somehow tricked the audience into thinking, like, oh, well, you know, it wouldn't sell in China.
They've not tricked Oscar Isaac, I'll say that.
They've lost control of both Oscar Isaac and John Boyega. They've lost control.
Like, they're gonna appear in, like, a fan fiction film 2021.
I wouldn't put it past them. Because that's another, like, straw man argument that always annoys me. It's like, they can't do it because they gotta make the Chinese money. It's like, they could make it anyway.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be hard.
Yeah.
But that's how it always tends to be, is with anything that's kind of gross. There's always got to be the way to justify it, right?
Yep. Rhetoric, my man. It bad.
Yes. Also, you know, real censorship's bad.
That too. Real censorship.
We haven't hit on really any examples of it.
Yeah.
But
it's all about money. The conclusion here, apparently, is that capitalism is bad.
And isn't that the conclusion to every conversation?
Actually, I have one truly anti-capitalist example of quote-unquote censorship to share as we wrap up. So you may remember, from a few years ago, the sensation that swept the mobile gaming nation, Flappy Bird.
Yeah?
And Flappy Bird, like, exploded, right? It was made by this guy. His name is Dong Nguyen. He's just, like, a guy, like, developing on his own. He's not with a company or anything. And it blew up. He was making, like, $50,000 a day while this thing was up. This man was rolling in it. Except he then realized that people were getting addicted to this game. He's talked about how he wanted Flappy Bird to be a game that you played for a couple of minutes to relax. And instead, people were playing it and getting angry and playing it too much. Mm-hmm. And because he felt guilt about how addicted people were becoming to Flappy Bird, he pulled it from storefronts and has not been released again.
Wow. What a hero.
I mean, there's like a version on some kind of Amazon thing, but not in the same way.
Yeah. I'm sure there's tons of Flappy Bird clones, too.
But Dong Nguyen, the anti-capitalist crusader we all need in the game censorship arena, censoring himself to save you from Flappy Bird.
Really, though, if we could put all this energy about censorship into something like loot boxes, maybe we'd be better off.
Look, pretty soon, if we don't deal with loot boxes, the government's going to deal with it for us. They're also going to make their own governmental ratings board. Like, yes. The loot boxes are an opening to real censorship happening if we can't come up with something like the ESRB that does at least a passable job.
Yeah. So, ooh, the specter of censorship is coming. Ooh.
Ooh. It's coming for your vagina bones.
You know what? I want to hear somebody on the floor of Congress utter the words vagina bones.
Because I wouldn't be surprised if it's already somewhere in the record. You know, people talk about weird things.
Somebody... Okay, so there was some discussion in the UK, and somebody on the about transgender rights or some sort of bill that they were passing a while ago, and somebody brought up several examples of anti-TERF memes.
Okay.
To just show on the floor of Parliament.
Okay. And
one of them is just an anime character with a gun editing in saying silence TERF. And they just showed it on the floor of Parliament as this is a threat.
Come on.
So, Congress, you're making a mess of things. At least you could make it an amusing mess over there. That's all I'm saying.
We just want some Winnie the Pooh memes.
Yeah, that's all we want. That's my random story for the week.
Well, folks, before we say anything else that will get us banned in China, this has been Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode. Have you experienced censorship in games? Do you feel like you have an example that is genuine censorship as opposed to the capitalistly motivated quasi-censorship that we talked about for the last hour or whatever? Write into us and let us know. I don't think we have an email address right now, right?
No, I don't believe so.
So
we made a change in hosting.
We've censored ourselves from the email world. But you can still reach out to us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Talk This Podcast, and we're on YouTube at Talk This Sisters. So shoot us a DM or a message or write on our wall or just tweet at us there if you've got censorship stories to share. Or games that you wish had censored themselves. I'll take that too.
Yeah.
Oh man, I didn't even talk about Kingdom Hearts 2 being censored.
How is that censored?
Daisy Duck spanking Donald got taken out.
Oh, what? They denied us the spanking content. You know what? I am upset about that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get my picket sign and stand outside of Squeenix. Give me the Donald butt.
I'll send you the video when we're done. Maybe I'll put it on our social media too. It's pretty tame.
No, it's a game for children. We can't have ducks spanking another duck.
Anyway, share your examples of your favorite censorship examples. Your favorite censorship examples. That's how serious I'm taking this.
I love this example of censorship.
Or games that you wish the designer had decided to cut some content for your locale. Or games that you're angry about, or bones that you wish had been included in your character models. You should talk to us, just not at Talk to Us anymore. But you should still check out our website, www.talkthispodcast.com. It's running faster now, I think. I think it loads faster with the new host.
Hopefully it just won't go down anymore. That's my that's my hope.
So peace out, GoDaddy. And come check out our website. We're going to be making some changes over the next couple of weeks to a month to a year.
Yeah.
Whenever Emma and I have time to do it. So check it out in its like old school glory right now before we update our bios to our adult lives and that kind of things.
I like where they did change the font too.
Yeah, I don't love the font.
Yeah.
There's changes coming, but you know what's not changing? How great the blog is. So while you're there on our website, you can read about us and about the show, the games in the hat. Well, about us like 2 years ago, TBH, but whatever. But you can also check out the blog, where you can see long-running series Clickbait Boyfriend, for which I discovered the Donald Duck spanking the first time, probably about a year ago now. And also Split Screen, where currently we're watching K-drama caffeinated fun on Coffee Prince, and My Hero Academia as I fall further and further behind, and Emma texts me every Saturday, you have to watch this. And every time...
I'm so excited for a super dumb reason for you guys to watch this episode that aired yesterday.
I feel like every time I watch an anime now, I look it up, and the guy who voices that character that I haven't seen yet, but it's all over their advertising, like, he's always voiced something in the shows that I'm watching, and I'm like, oh, that guy again, wonder who that is. Yeah. So yeah, check that out. Check out the other content that's on there. I'm really going to try to actually write some video game focused blogs that aren't about Kingdom Hearts 3 this year, maybe, if I have time. So the blog's a good thing to check out. And last but not least, if you enjoy the show and you want to continue to support us, even as we're pulled from the Chinese airwaves, we're talking about Winnie the Pooh this week, you should subscribe. We are on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, Overcast, Pocket Cast, and Pandora Podcasts, both online and on the app. So subscribe to us there, leave a rating and a review if you're feeling especially generous, and you'll never miss an episode every Sunday at noon.
Next time it's a full episode, and we are talking about Destroy All Humans and Judgment.
Right.
And our next side quest is after the Kingdom Hearts 3 DLC, but I bet we will be recording it before the Kingdom Hearts 3 DLC.
Catch Emma at the Nier concert in Chicago.
If we really wanted to, we could try to do Friday, and I could edit it also on Friday night.
I'll consider it.
It would have to be early Friday. Like, not early.
Let's have this discussion about our schedules,
work.
Maybe off the air.
I just want the viewers to know if they should expect the episode to be entirely about Remind or not.
It won't be entirely about Remind. We got 7 weeks of content to talk about. I'm going to try to play some Yakuza, because that's like the same thing as playing Judgment, right?
True. It's
More
true.
Or less.
Fair enough.
So,
until... Yeah.
So I also want to note, I think this episode might be like our 3-year anniversary episode.
Oh, really?
It's pretty darn close.
Yeah.
I don't remember the exact date we talked this up, but I think it's either this week or next week that is going to be the, like, closest to it.
Well, tell us the episode you wish that we'd have censored.
Yeah, what episode do you wish we'd censored? The one where I talk about Mario's penis? Probably that one.
I think it's that one. Anyway, this week, I hope you were able to freely speak about whatever you want.